I am sure sports. You know me there. I'm coast to coast representing. I mean, I say this is righteous representing for Omar. You don't know, come get your sports over here from near and far. Boy, 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 boy. Me say I am sure sports, one thing me sure about. When me say sure, that me not doubt. Come get your sports, get it over here. Come subscribe, repost and share. I am sure sports, one thing me sure about. When me say sure, that me not doubt. Come get your sports, get it over here. Come subscribe, repost and share. If me not sure, that me not say it. Know who score, that me not say it. Never know no game play, that me not say it. If me never seen a game, me not know who play. For your sports news, better come over here so. For your soccer news, then come over here so. If you don't love sports, still come over here so. For the day done, you a go love over here so.
So when it comes on to behavior concerning football, Jamaica is decent. I am sure that if we can get all of these things done, set in place by the end of April, it gives us enough time before the World Cup campaign. Not afraid of no Brazil, no Argentina with these crapper players. We are good enough. Remember to like, subscribe, share. Listen, comment. Let me know what your thoughts are.
All right, good afternoon. Welcome to I Am Sure Sports. I'm your host, Manningsman, and it is my pleasure to be with you today for our second show of the day. As you know, Pioneer and the gang just completed the NBA Roundup show. Was a very, very good one, so you can go and check out that video. But today, we continue our discussion on football, taking it far and taking it very wide and covering all the aspect of the game of football. Getting a vast amount of knowledge, information, wisdom in terms of how to move the game forward. But firstly, let me take time out to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Prestige Finance, lending a helping hand when you need it most. So if you need a loan, you're here in Jamaica, up to $100,000, right? 100,000 Jamaican dollars. Listen, just call Prestige Finance. Let them know you heard about them from I Am Sure Sports, and they will ensure that you get a loan with no processing fee, same day processing, 0 to 4% in terms of the interest rate. Call them at 876-884-7390. Also want to say a big thank you to Launch Legacy. Handle risk, seek legacy. For all your personal insurance needs in Canada and the USA, visit them at launchlegacy.com or call or text 647-989-0782. If you're involved in sport and you're working for money, you want to get to a place where your money is working for you. And Launch Legacy will tell you about products that will do exactly that for you. In fact, next week, Thursday, the 10th of February, on this platform, they will be having a financial webinar to share with you some products, some financial products that can help you in retirement, right? So big thank you to both our sponsors. Also want to say thank you to all the persons who have joined in to listen to this. So good to have you. I see Chris, the sports guy, Ricardo, Giovanni, and all the rest of you. Listen, hit the like button once you jump on, share the content, and also if you have not yet, subscribe to the channel. Today I have the privilege of having a Puerto Rican, right? Yeah, and this is going to be good. Played some football as well. I mean, I don't know how good he was, but he was a goalkeeper. Played with some Jamaicans as well. So maybe after this, I'll do my own investigation and to find out how good a goalkeeper he was, especially in training. But here's what I want you to do. If you know any youngster who are trying to move in terms of probably locally from the local football to USL, MLS, or somewhere else, you need to tell them, listen, you need to listen, you need to listen, you need to come and get this information, because Cody Laurendi, I hope I get his name. I know I'm getting the Kobe right. That's very easy. And it's Lauren, which is Lauren, and then you have DI. All right. So DI means two, right? So it's Lauren times two. So he's Cody Lauren times two. I don't know if that's what the name means, but let's welcome Cody to the show.
What an introduction. I love that. I love it. I love it. Yeah, you got the name, my name right. Laurendi. Close enough.
Laurendi. There
Hey,
you go. There
respect,
you go.
respect. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, man. All right, Cody. Firstly, I mean, tell us about your entry into football, how you got involved in this game and what you're doing now. Just tell Jamaica a little bit about you. You're in the virtual Jamaica right now, the virtual
Right.
space. So tell us a little bit about initial involvement in football and what do you do in football now.
Of course. Of course. Yes, my name is Cody Laurendi. Recently retired from playing professional football. Was a goalkeeper for about 15 years professionally. Born and raised in Florida. Spent a few years of my career in Puerto Rico. So I'm quite familiar with the Caribbean. Was fortunate enough to represent their national team as goalkeeper for the past 5 to 6 years. Since stepping away from playing, I've moved directly into player representation. So I work as a player's agent both at the USL League One, USL Championship, MLS, and NWSL, as well as European footballing leagues for the women.
Okay, awesome. Is there a player or some players that we may know that you have worked with in terms of representation before?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm new to the endeavor. I'd say I'm in this about a year. But um, if you're familiar with the USL landscape, I represent a striker by the name of Greg Hurst, who's made his move from Union Omaha in League One directly to Phoenix Rising, where I believe Kevin Lambert is still there,
Yeah,
Jamaican, right?
yeah.
On the women's side, I represent a striker who actually plays for Liverpool by the name of Katie Stengel. So those are the two bigger names in my book of business at the moment.
Okay, okay. But I know you played with some Jamaican during your
Yes.
playing years. I mean, who are those
Yeah,
Jamaicans you would have played with?
one of this man. This goes a little bit way back. So for you young bucks, you probably don't know the reference. Nick Adlery. Nick played for Jamaica for a bit. Him and I were teammates for the Puerto Rico Islanders, or with the Puerto Rico Islanders, back in early 2010 and 11. Furthermore, been teammates with Omar Gordon, or Wayne Gordon, however you want to.
Yeah, Owen Garden.
Yes, great person. More recently, Javon Watson. Javon, wonderful person. And then to round it out, Deshaun Brown. So all of us have shared a locker room together at some point in our careers. Wonderful people, wonderful footballers, and definitely privileged to have shared the field with those men.
Okay, so outside of just being from the Caribbean, in terms of Puerto Rico, you
Yes,
do know a little bit about Jamaican
correct,
culture and
correct.
thing. All right. Well, again, thank you for coming on, and
Of course.
I know I'm looking forward to this conversation. So let's move. So you represent player in terms of agent. In an official sense, it's an agent. That's kind of work. Now, um, our league here in Jamaica. Let's bring up some of the stuff. A lot of our players, um, you know, they would love to leave from Jamaica straight into Europe. We know that pathway many times is probably difficult. All right. How would you suggest, or what are the ways you would suggest as an agent that players could make that transition, seeing that they are not many times readily accepted in the major European markets?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, and I would say while your football intelligence may be top, my 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 concern is the emotional intelligence, right? Especially for somebody who's not left home, especially for somebody who's used to a certain culture that goes abroad. And much like we see today, we see everybody's highlight reel. We see everybody, banging in goals, or goalkeepers saving, shots at the top stanch. That's not the reality. That's not the reality. And I'm speaking from experience. I spent 3 years of my professional career away from family and loved ones in Belgium. And you really kind of at a young age, you find out who likes the idea of being a professional footballer and those who are actually willing to put in the hard work and deal with the ups and the downs that really go in to making it professionally. A lot of people are sent over there far too early, in my opinion. And if they are sent over there, they don't have the necessary support system that can help them through the tough days, because those tough days are inevitable. You're going to have bad training sessions. You're going to have bad matches. And if you're on the other side of the world, right, with no real support system, who's dealing with that? You're dealing with that mentally. And that is what is honestly the difference in those who can make it professionally and those who kind of fall by the wayside. I'm of the firm belief that there's a process to this, and I think the U.S. I think the USL League One, USL Championship are a wonderful, wonderful building block to ultimately get you to Europe. Because frankly, and I'm speaking in complete honesty, 99% of people that are going after this way of life or this business will not make it. So I think building a bridge basically from Jamaica or anywhere in the Caribbean, anywhere where you haven't been away from home for a long time, bringing you into a professional environment where you have to be a pro, not just during your training session, but the 21, 22 hours of the day. And you also have to be a pro 24/7, 365, not just when you feel like it, can provide massive value.
Awesome. I love that. So, all right. So, I'm a youngster and I'm hearing this now and I say, wow, that makes sense. Why just jump straight into Europe? Why not go to USL, one USL championship, MLS, get some experience for a year or two and then move on. All right. How can that happen for a Jamaican? I mean, he's listening now and he wants to know, well, Cody, that's good, but how am I going to get there? What is it that I'm scouted, spotted? Will you come and speak? How does he move from where he's at to the USL or the MLS or the USL Championship and make the transition?
Yeah,
What's the how?
I tell him, and I say this half jokingly, hit my inbox. Not to say that I'm a facilitator. That's all that I am. And I utilize my contacts through when I was a player to help open doors for people. There's no guarantees. Don't get me wrong. My suggestion is to get as much film as you possibly can, to play as often as you possibly can, to highlight. Let's take, for example, you're talking about a center back, right? Highlight the amount of times that you're able to disrupt the pass or break up a play. Highlight yourself in a way of you're winning the ball back, you have possession, and you're completing the first pass forward. Highlight your ability to lock down a striker. Show your mobility, both in and out of possession. Show your footballing acumen, your brain, right, in and out of possession, right? Coaches and decision makers will view that. They're not just going to view okay, this guy heads the ball great or this guy scores wonderful goals. No, they're going to look at the total package. Can this player absorb the information that we're bringing to him tactically, and then out on the field, can they really stick to a game plan, stick to an idea that the coach has put into practice, and ultimately have success? So my initial suggestion is to record as much as you possibly can.
Okay. All right. So, how does as an agent, how in terms of the clubs in Jamaica? So, I mean, again, a club in Jamaica, he has a good young prospect. You approach them and say, I'm Kobe, I'm Cody. All right. I'm interested in Omar. What happens from there? Because I mean, here it is that these clubs are saying, listen, we need money to produce the next talent. We can't allow him to go to free, but you're really in USL Championship, USL One. There's not a lot of money that needs to be paid for transfers.
Correct.
Right. So the club is saying that if I send him over there for little money, how am I going to have enough financial resources in Jamaica to make the other players come through the system?
Yeah,
I
no, it's
mean,
a wonderful question. And I think I think the conversation has to center around long-term thinking and long-term opportunity for the player. That kind of goes down the road of what's called a sell-on fee, where at least the initial move may not, provide massive dividends financially, but it's the move after where the player has matured, the player has 50 professional games under his belt, and then can go and is more equipped, I should say, both football wise, but emotionally, right, to make that jump abroad, right, and then you're talking about a sell-on fee that can then be paid back to the club in form of a training compensation or you name it. But ultimately, there has to be a long-term thought here. It can't just be we need money right away. It has to be, okay, this is a project. This is an 18-year-old, 19-year-old player that with now 2 more years of professional experience away from home, developing in a new, in a new environment, we believe that he can be sold on for a big sum of money, but we have to delay the quote unquote financial gratification of that player, those dividends.
All right. So I want to make sure I'm getting this because this is good stuff. So initially, a club in Jamaica, listen, must understand that. All right. This is a project, number one. All right. The long term is this player will probably in 2 years be worth 5 million euros, as an example, 1 million.
Right.
All right.
Right.
Or what 1 million. All right. So at that time, you can benefit by getting training compensation or a sell-on fee. But initially, moving him from Jamaica to the USL, there's not a major fee that is really involved.
Correct.
Right. And so some of that, is it that it has to be free, or there could be some level of compensation as an agent? You'd say to a club, listen, well, we can't just do it completely free. How much can a USL club say initially? All right. Yeah, the player's going to be here for 2 years. Let's give them $500, $5,000. That's the initial fee. That's what we can afford. What is that fee that USL club you think estimation would be willing to give to a local club, especially for a top young talent?
Yeah. Well, I would speak from personal experience. Players that I represent in their contracts, I have buyouts of anywhere between 5 to 15,000 US.
Okay.
Again, these are not astronomical sums of money. However, we go back to that term long-term thinking, right? Providing the opportunity for one, the player to leave, to come and really hone his skill and sharpen his skill both on and off the field. And then two, you now develop the relationship. You develop the relationship with the Jamaican-based club that now has a direct pathway to the U.S. market. I think it's very silly and very short-sighted for any club to stand in a player's way, of professional achievement, because again, you have to keep in mind that this is a project. This is not he's here today, the money's in our account tomorrow. No, this is a developmental side of things that ultimately can work out as time goes on. But if you are going to stand in the player's way, none of this can happen. So
yeah. So the buyout, when you say, all right, there is a buyout to buy out the contract for 5,000, does that still mean that the sell-on stays in place?
Those are things that get negotiated as well. Like you can, yeah. Like for example, there's players that I represent that have a sell-on fee of upwards of like 30%. I think the going rate, I could be wrong, but the going rate is like 20% of a sell-on fee. So you want to put the player in the best position to succeed, and also don't want any other clubs to kind of be scared off of any sort of agreement that's already been put in place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, I have some questions coming in, but we're going to take them at the 30 minutes break so you can respond to some of the,
Okay.
because some of these people have players who they are connected to
Yes.
in the system. I know of one player now who is trying to, we have heard stories of players wanting to leave. They never got the opportunity, and then they end up being in Jamaica for the rest of their professional career.
Right.
And it didn't just hurt them in terms of their ability to express themselves on the field, but because the salaries in Jamaica are so low for playing football, it's a tremendous setback for them and their families. Now, um, worst case scenario, a player comes to the USL and doesn't transition to a bigger market. How financially beneficial can that be? At the USL Championship or USL One, is it a viable league for people from the Caribbean to come and play and earn a living to provide for their families back home, even if somehow they don't matriculate to the biggest clubs?
Right.
Yeah.
Answer is yes. USL Championship, absolutely. The money has gotten better. This past offseason, the USL Players Association now was able to agree on the first ever league's collective bargaining agreement, which allows for contract standardization, length of contract, and minimum salary. Whereas before there was no rule and regulation around it.
Okay.
So teams were, able to, I'll say this very frankly, take advantage of young people's willingness to bet on themselves professionally by offering them $0 contracts, which I am firmly against. Now it's getting better. There's again, like I said, there's rules and regulations in place. If you are a young single guy, USL League One is you can make a living. It gets a little bit more difficult if you are playing USL League One and you have other mouths to feed. If you have a family, if you have a wife and you have kids, yes, it's difficult. But I think you keep that all in perspective when you're young and you're really chasing after something. From a USL Championship standpoint, every team there is a variance in which teams operate budget wise.
Yeah.
Some better than the others. I take Kevon's team, Phoenix. They're the top. They're
upper echelon. So
Yeah.
maybe their salary structure is different.
Yeah, I know guys that are there that are bringing in six figures US, right? So you can make a good solid living, right? Somewhere like that. Now, if you take, let's take, a Memphis or a Hartford, that they're it's hard. I'll say it's harder. I'll be very diplomatic in my response. It's harder to make a living there because they don't go above and beyond in the offer. It's like, here's your base salary, go find your own home or go find your own housing. Whereas other teams are saying, here's your base salary, we're also going to give you a housing stipend that you can put forward. But again, you're going to get,
and that is down to the agent negotiating for the player,
Right.
because like it is up to you representing the player and being able to say to the club, listen, if he's going to get $10, then there needs to be housing compensation.
Correct. I mean, I'll give you an example. This past offseason, a club wanted to offer a 2-year deal to a player, but not give him his housing stipend or his rent stipend in the offseason. And my response to that was, listen, I want my client in your community doing promotional events for the club in the offseason. Therefore, he needs somewhere to live. And clubs, more times than not, are willing to work with you and say, yes, you're absolutely right. This is an asset. We want to treat the player as an asset that he is. But you also have to be aware of that, because team's initial offer is not going to be everything that you expect it to be.
Yeah, so somebody needs to be there to negotiate on your behalf, really, who understands the market and the systems.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Is there like, I know it's hard to measure right across like USL One, but is there like a standard amount? Like, listen, a player is not going to get below, like you said, a minimum wage. You're not going to get below, I don't know, $1,000, $2,000. Is there something that you can just give as, listen, if you come to the USL Championship, it's not going to be below $2,000 a month. If you are in USL One, it's not going to be below, like, what is the minimum?
Yeah. So I would say from experience, the minimum for a League One, and now keep in mind, the club takes care of the housing.
Right.
The club takes care of the housing, right?
In League One.
In League One, yes.
Oh, okay.
So and a lot of clubs in the USL Championship do as well. They give you the option, at least in Championship. They say, would you like a stipend, a monthly rent stipend, so you can choose where you want to live? or do you want us to provide you the team, quote unquote, team housing, where you'll most likely be with a roommate? So you'll get, it's a player by player decision, right? But you'll also get guys who have families that will take the stipend and they'll say, listen, I don't want to live with a roommate, right? I have a young child. I'd like to find my own place. The League One level, now bear in mind the housing is provided, so there's no out-of-pocket expense for the player. You're probably looking about, the lowest that I've seen is like $1,250 a month for base salary. Then you'll be able, if your agent negotiates well, you'll be able, if you're a striker, goals and assists, team of the week, player of the month, team of the month. And then, maybe you do an escalating bonus structure where every 5 goals, you get $500, every 10 goals, $1,000,
Right.
and so forth. So there's ways to kind of get creative with the structure of earning. It doesn't just have to be directly, okay, this is my base salary and that's all I'm entitled to. Look, and let's be honest, these teams with on-field success, they get to promote themselves, right? So they're in the business of winning. So they should incentivize the players to
excel and do well. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. And let me just explain. All right. 1,250 is not the standard. It is, all Cody is saying is that from what he has experienced, the lowest he has seen is that amount. But there are other clubs that I know in USL championship that do like 3,500, I understand, a month for players. And I know there's a player that he gets that in addition to that rental, that housing allowance and bonuses.
Correct.
Which sometimes accumulates in totality to 5,000 US monthly, which I'm saying that even if a player don't get into Europe, that is helpful.
Correct.
Given where he's coming from initially.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And look what it does for you professionally. I mean, plenty of USL talent has represented the Jamaican national team in past years, correct?
Yeah. There you go. Before the game, is saying the minimum in the USL championship is around $1,900.
So now
per month.
So now it's actually changed. Now the minimum, what's called a flex contract, the minimum compensation for a USL championship club, the lowest that they're allowed to offer is $2,200 for 10 months of a year. That is what's called the flex contract. There are only 6 of those per roster per USL championship club.
Oh.
Everybody else must be on $2,700 a month times 10 months or above.
Oh.
Unless
this is good because players may not know this.
Correct. Well, this is brand new information, and the only reason that I know it is because I was on I was a player, but I also helped start the Players Association. That 5 years ago, contract standardization was what we were after. And one important thing to note is there's a third kind of tier that you could fall into, what we call unemancipated minor. If you're under the age of 18, you're able to be paid minimum $1,700 a month.
Okay, if you're under the age of 18.
Correct.
Okay. Also, you can still get paid, though aren't there labor laws?
Well, yes, if you're an American. If you're an American, if you're coming from abroad, that's different.
Okay, I get it. Also, the labor law only applies to American.
As far as to the best of my knowledge.
All right, this is very, very good information, right? So I mean, you're in the USL League One. I mean, you can probably get up to $2,000 a month, depending on how good you are. All of that. In the championship, there is a flex contract for $2,200.
Correct.
That's only for 6 roster spots. After that, it goes up to 2,700, and this is for contracts running up to 10 months.
10
All right.
months is the minimum length of deal. Whereas in the past, what they have done to a lot of players is they've had them sign what's called prorated contracts. So if your last game is the regular season because your team is not going to playoffs, your pay stops that day. If you lose in the quarterfinal, your pay stops that day.
Oh, whoa. So now the contract runs for 10 months.
At minimum.
Whether your team goes right at minimum. So it means that if your team don't make the playoff, you still get paid.
10 yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. That's
which before, theoretically, not even theoretically, realistically, you would have players who would go without pay for 3-4 months sometimes.
Yeah, because once your team gets knocked out, then you stop getting paid immediately.
Correct. That's your last pay. That, like, say it happens on the 5th. Say you play in the last regular season, and the last regular season game is the 5th, and you guys do not advance. You're done. Your pay stops. It's what's called a prorated contract.
Okay. So you really get paid as you play.
Say it again.
You really get paid as you play.
Yeah. So it's not like on you sign the contract, and it's a start date, and then how it's read in the contract is official start date, last day of regular season or playoffs.
Okay. All right. So that's from the financial side. But how often do USL clubs either scout in Jamaica? Now you're an agent. How do you get in touch with a Jamaican? How do you know what Jamaican player? Is it that you just look at some players here and you approach them to represent them, or the clubs tell you, listen, we need a center forward, a center back, or maybe Union Omaha tells you that,
Yes.
or one of the other clubs say, listen, we're looking for this, and you scan the Caribbean, or you already have players on your radar? And I mean, how do you know the Jamaican players? I mean,
that's a wonderful question. Look, right now, I'm completely transparent. A lot of it is the relationships that I've developed over the years. Look, I trust what Nick has to say. I trust with what Deshorn has to say. If I reach out to Javon, I say, hey, who has it, right? And not just it on the field, but who has it up here, right? And then if it comes to it, and I'm able to develop, we are able to develop a relationship where I genuinely want to help this person, then I open up my book of contacts, and based off of need, we'll use I don't know, Miami FC for an example. I'll call the CEO of Miami FC and say, hey, you guys are in the market for a center back. I know you guys have a scout that scouts the Caribbean. Have a look at this gentleman. Let me know what you think. That's honestly how it works, or that's my process. Initially, my process has nothing to do with football. I care about the person. I care about developing the relationship first and foremost, finding out what their goals and their aspirations are. Has nothing to do with on-field anything yet. I'm a believer of long-term relationships with long-term people, and that is honestly how I start any sort of business working relationship.
I ask you that question, right? Because because we're such a small footballing nation, that the clubs many times that sign contracts with the players coming out of our high school system. So a lot of these players who come through a high school system, they get tied to contracts with the clubs here in Jamaica, say for 5 years. Which sometimes, and because the players,
lifetime in football.
yeah, but I'm saying, but why this happens sometimes is you're 17-year-old coming out of school, you're not going to go into college,
right?
And so this club is going to pay you money. They think you have potential. So to protect their spending, they sign you to this 5-year contract, which means until you're 22, you're owned by them. So the player then don't have an agent, because the club will say to the player, don't, if anyone talks to you, let them talk to us. So the person who signed the contract with you is also your quote unquote agent,
Mhm.
which is a conflict of interest.
Correct.
All right. So how would you suggest that in our present league, should we have an agent that represents the entire league? Like someone like you to say, listen, approach our JPL and say, listen, I can be the agent that represents the Jamaica Premier League. And I'll have scouts to give me names and stuff, and I'll get them plugged in as clubs have needs. Could that work to just remove the owners from being agents of the players that oftentimes cause the players to end up staying in Jamaica
Right.
and just mess up their careers?
Yeah, that's counterintuitive to all of this. You want, I'm of a firm belief that you want your best and brightest to succeed at the highest level possible. So if you're signing these high school age kids that really aren't educated on what exactly they're signing, and they don't have people in their ear giving them accurate advice, I would be concerned from a strictly business standpoint that that's kind of a messed up business process, or way of doing things. I understand wanting to capitalize on your investment, but at the same time, you're doing it to the detriment of the player long term. Um, I think I think if a team really wanted a player, um, I think a deal could get done, but people have to be realistic. They have to be realistic in terms of the financial opportunity, but more importantly, the professional opportunity for the player. Because we get back to thinking about long term. This is not a short term thing here. If if a team in Jamaica starts this pipeline, it helps them just as much as it helps the club that the player is going to, as it helps the player, because you're gonna now develop this reputation as someone who can develop a player and move them on, rather than developing a player and keeping that player here for the bulk of his career, which doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, because I say that because in Jamaica, if you are a player
Yeah.
and you employ or engage a agent to represent you, most of our clubs will not talk with you.
That's incredibly short term thinking, and ultimately not having the player's best interest in mind. Unfortunately,
Yeah,
that's the reality of the situation. I think if you're looking to, as a footballing nation, if you're looking for them to grow, there has to be a thought of, okay, what's best for the player, and if it, which kind of leads me to believe that they shouldn't be signing any sort of agreement with any player that's under a certain age, strictly because the player doesn't really grasp what
what they are signing to.
yeah,
They
yeah,
don't have an agent. So
right,
if a player says to a club, talk to my agent, the player is dismissed. All right, you don't have to come to my, because the options are very limited,
right,
right? So unless we have like agents who, like a person like you who says, okay, so Cody is my agent, they're not going to talk to that player again. They're not going to talk to you, but you could still be an agent and move that player out of Jamaica, which is, I think, what needs to happen. We need more agents who can not only negotiate with these clubs,
right,
but have access to markets overseas.
right, right,
So when the clubs out here refuse to engage them, that agent can say, well, I can look to the USL. I
right.
can look to USL 1, USL Championship. Because what that will do is put a demand on the local clubs to start listening to the agents, because the top talents are choosing agents outside of the country.
And look, I understand. I come at this not from I come at this from using a player's mindset, right? And I understand there are a lot of the term I use is BS, salesman, and they can be a little predatory in terms of, oh, I'm gonna sell you this wonderful dream about moving abroad and making all this money, and mom's never gonna have to work again, family set for life. No, it's you kind of have to shift the conversation to what's best for the player, and how can we help open a door that maybe wouldn't have been open to him in the past, but can help further his footballing development, therefore helping the club that he's coming from. This scarcity mindset of like, I got to hold on to every player and I can't let them leave unless $100 million offer or bid comes into them, in for them, is such an outdated way of thinking. There's plenty of opportunity out there, but you also, from a club standpoint, you have to be willing to engage in a good faith negotiation, as they say.
Yeah. Before the game, he's asking Cody, are the clubs in Jamaica organized in category
In categories based
on
off, I'm
FIFA
assuming,
law?
off of FIFA laws.
And then he goes on to say, would that structure be helpful to getting these clubs compensated?
So,
I'm not sure if both things type, but do you understand?
so if just so I'm clear, if they follow like a FIFA schedule or calendar, or are they, I'm not 100% sure either. I do think, look, I think rules and regulations are important, massively important. And I do think aligning themselves with FIFA, with the governing body, is very smart. But I also think putting standards and practices in place where, okay, let's cap maybe not cap, but let's put a percentage of a sell-on fee to the player. That way, both the club is incentivized to develop the talent and move them on.
Yeah.
I think that there's value there, but I also think you can't, in any negotiation, both sides of it, you can't dig your heels in and say it's my way or the highway.
Yeah.
No, you have to. It's a give and take.
There have to be flexibility within the how the rules are
Exactly.
executed.
I know I've hit on this a couple times, but long-term thinking, even though it's a short-sighted career path in terms of earning potential for players, the business mind of those who are in charge of these teams have to understand long-term.
Is there any system, as I was suggesting earlier? I think when I spoke to Bobby, he was speaking about maybe one of the things they can look at is because I know most of our players don't have agent representation. They are represented by the clubs when
Right.
anything's supposed to happen. Is there any system that you know where there's a particular agent in smaller league like ours that represents all the players who need representation? Like not for the players per se, but for all the clubs in the league.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't believe so. If there is, I've not heard of it. I do, however, know that there is an agency, and again, I could be incorrect here, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. The Canadian Premier League, the CPL. I do believe there is an agency that's affiliated with the league that requires each club to sign a certain number of players from that agency. But as far as USL Championship or League One, there's nobody to my knowledge.
Because I know, like in MLS, when deals are done, it is done through MLS. It's not done. Is it done through the clubs or MLS? It has to go through.
The MLS is unique because they're what's called single entity. So
Okay.
even if you're a player, even though you play for, let's say, I don't know, Houston Dynamo, New York Red Bull, whoever, you're contracted to MLS, right? So their business model, if they sell on a player, everybody shares in the sell-on fee. So it gets dispersed. So you have that money. You're competitive on the field, right? You're competitors against each other, but in a business sense, you're this.
One owner. Yeah.
Correct. Whereas the USL, The USL is individual markets. Individual clubs are able to run the way that they want to run. They're able to obtain sponsorships, however they want to obtain sponsorships. I mean, you see it. It's the jersey sponsor for MLS, Adidas. Everybody's Adidas. You
Oh
know,
yes, yes.
there's no flexibility in that. You know, one team can't be Nike, one team can't be New Balance, Puma, you name it. USL is kind of shifting, kind of moving itself in that direction. But as of right now, all single entity or all individual clubs rather than single entity.
Okay. Before the game is, I think he's trying to be- clarify. He says the question is tied to training compensation.
Yes.
I think he's wondering if the clubs are aware of this training compensation, because the suggestion would be if they know this, they shouldn't really give a player a hard time to leave,
Correct.
because down the road they could have that sign on where
Right.
they get in the future training compensation.
Yeah, I hope that they're aware of that. That's my point of being of understanding that if there is genuine interest from a player to leave, at least initially to go to the US and compete at the USL championship level, it's in their best interest as the developmental club to be on board with the move, because the training compensation that then would come in the form of a big European move would then directly positively impact the developmental club. So yeah, I think they would be well suited to understand the rules and regulations around it. Um, yeah, I use the example of DeAndre Yedlin from the U.S. when he made his move to, I believe it was Newcastle. Newcastle called the University of Akron, where he played college, asking where they could send the training compensation to, because they had no idea of how any of this or
Okay.
yeah, it's very very strange. So I think there's a definite need to understand the rules and to be on board with the rules, because ultimately it benefits the developmental the club that develops the player.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, what about as an agent? What about your own engagement with the Jamaican market? Have you ever had reason? I know you're fairly new
Mhm.
in terms of this, but how have you found your engagement with Caribbean territories in terms of moving player? Has it been accommodating? Has it been difficult? Or is it something you're looking forward to tapping into the Jamaican market space? Like I'm saying that there are many footballers and people connected to them who are listening to this. Remember saying that I didn't know that. How can I get I mean, what has your experience been like?
Yeah, so like you said, my experience thus far has been limited. Having said that, having the unique experience of living and understanding culturally, and then having friends and teammates that are Jamaican or Trini or Puerto Rican or Cuban, wherever it may be, there's talent, and I'm a big believer in our being the bridge to help develop that talent, because like you stated earlier, a lot of guys spend their entire professional career still back in Jamaica. I, all I want to be is I want to be a facilitator of furthering professional careers. Um, incredible athletes throughout the Caribbean. They just need the opportunity, and that's my whole goal in all of this, is to provide through relationships that I've built, through trust that I've built with decision makers, to play a small role in that ultimate success.
Okay. All right. So, my next question, one of my next question would be then, do you have plans? I mean, is there anyone in Jamaica that you have had your eyes on, or any spaces available? I know that there's a USL team that is being formed. I think you said they're moving down to Fort Worth,
Correct.
and they may be looking to fill roster spots. I
Correct.
mean, uh, young player, talented player listening to this and say, you know what, I'll be interested in a move like that.
Yeah.
How
So
would you advise them in terms of the process working?
yeah, so it's important to note this as well. Being considered an international, the club that you're going to will have to ultimately pay more for your services. They'll have to pay more because they're going to be paying for your P1 visa or any sort of visa expense that goes along with it. So you have to be undoubtedly talented, right? So if you're a marginal player, teams teams are not going to take that risk on you if you're just kind of run of the mill marginal player. You have to be exceptional, because you have to understand the economics that go into it. They could get an American kid straight out of university and they don't have to pay, the visa expense, which is upwards of, I want to say like $10,000 at least, and that's at the USL level. When you're talking MLS level, it's even more, it's astronomical in terms of the sums of money.
That's to get the P1 visa?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So there's an expense that goes along with it. So it's not just as easy as cut and dry as, hey, there's a new team that needs players. They're getting better at it in terms of identifying the talent. But again, it's the Caribbean, Jamaica specifically, and then as a whole, the Caribbean is somewhere that it's massively untapped, in my opinion. There's talent. Don't get me wrong, right? But I still am a firm believer that, in 2-3 years time, you can have a nice little pipeline of, from the Jamaican Pro League straight into the US market, and players getting 50 to 100 professional matches under their belt.
Yeah. All right. I have some, Ishmael King is saying, you mentioned Cuba. How hard or easy is it to get
Oh, it's a good question.
players from there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think historically, the ones, the Odesinel Coopers, the Frank Lopez's of the world, guys that I've played either alongside or against, they have all defected at one point or another. I believe Frank did as well. I may be speaking out of turn, so apologize if I'm incorrect, but I know through different competitions. I mean, Osvaldo Alonso is a good example in the MLS. They came over here for a tournament and they defected.
Okay.
So that's still very real. That's a great question. There's a couple that I've been teammates with throughout the years in Puerto Rico. But again, getting them to the US, that's a whole another can of worms, a whole difficult situation.
Yeah. And then our London Nicholas says, I like how you both come from a growth mindset. Very valuable information for our young talented players. And then Lulu is saying, why so much money for the P1 visa?
That's a good question.
Because they need a P1 visa to play in the USL 1, USL Championship, or MLS, right?
Correct.
Or that is only for international players, or it's for any player who is not a native of the.
Yeah. So if you're not a domestic player, if you're not if you don't have a U.S. passport, then you have to have a P1 visa. You have to have a visa expense paid for by the club, which the club takes care of. It's not an out-of-pocket expense for the player, but it costs. I don't know. That's a good Lou. That's a good question. I don't know why it costs what it costs, but it does cost a good amount of change.
That's very interesting, because sometimes people may be wondering why this player don't go to the USL. But like you just said, there is a cost.
Correct.
Outside of salary, outside of accommodation, which is the visa to get that 10,000. I mean, so imagine if you had 6 players now, you bring it, that's 60,000.
Correct. So think about that in terms of people's ability to recruit. They really can't afford to get it wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like you have to be so sure, because your job's on the line as a scout or as a coach or as a technical director, GM, you name it, right? You have your trust in your own eyes, or the people that are put in place to find these talents. You have to, the level of trust has to be at an all-time high for you to pull the trigger on bringing this talent over. Because you can't, because that eats into what is already a small budget massively.
Yeah, and then for you as an agent, I mean, if you sell the wrong player, quote unquote, then I mean your reputation. I mean, why would the club want to come back to you next year?
Correct.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. And that's kind of how I that's why I'm talking about the building of the relationship, learning the person behind the player, right? Football, yes, of course, it's very important, right? But I want to be able to work with somebody who's motivated, who has that, what we just talked about, growth mindset, who is willing to go above and beyond, not just be happy with going to training and I don't really care how well I train, just pay me and let me do my thing. I'm not about that. I'm about working for the player that has aspirations to take it as high and as far as they possibly can.
Yeah. All right. This is one of our coaches here. He says, I mean, what are your plans for our Jamaican players? Are you looking to get some talent?
Look, I am looking for the long-term relationship. So whether that's technical directors, head coaches, players directly, look, I know I do not guarantee anything. And that's important to state. I am not in the business of guarantees. The only thing that I can promise is that if I feel that you have what it takes, and again, this is subjective, it's one man's opinion, then I will do everything in my power to help get your profile to those decision makers.
Yeah.
So whether that, it could start as something as simple as an interaction on social media, but if we develop this relationship to a point where, hey, I want to doors for you, I am always willing to do that.
All right. Lulu is asking, what is the pathway for players to grow beyond the USL? Is MLS or Europe markets prioritized for transfer? Jamaican players will want to know. The path forward isn't singular.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question as well. Obviously, if you're at look, from a club standpoint, they're in the same boat as the player. They want to go to the best opportunity, and ultimately, who's going to pay the most for the player. So it's the club's incentivized too to develop the player to a point where you can get the big European clubs to really have their eyes on it, because, like we talked about, the rising tide lifting all ships, right? It looks wonderful for the selling club, and it looks great on the player, right? And then you can now develop that perception that you are the franchise to go to if you want to go abroad. I use FC Dallas as the example. They've developed so many young talents that have played either none or very little first team football for FC Dallas, but have made the move abroad. And FC Dallas has recouped all of that transfer fee, training compensation, whatever term you want to use, back from those players.
Okay, just give us any of those names come to mind
from FC or from
Dallas, yeah.
Oh, Weston McKennie is a perfect example.
Okay.
Weston McKennie is a good one. I think Justin Shea just went abroad. Who else? There's a couple others, but they've had Reggie Cannon is another one. Plays in Portugal. Who am I missing?
Okay.
I'm missing a big one.
Hey, that's good, man. That's enough names for us to know that it makes sense.
Yeah.
Is the USL moving to sell players to Europe club on a regular basis? I think it is. I tell you why, because what I've found is that a lot of the players from Jamaica who end up going to Kevin Lambert is a good example.
Mm-hmm.
Like, many people thought like Kevin Lambert would have moved on, but he has been in the USL. Maybe he's earning, obviously, but and so there is a fear amongst the Jamaican populace that if the players go to USL 1, USL Championship, they're going to be stuck there for the rest of their career. And I think that is why here they're asking, what is the pathway for these players to, once they because their game is going to be improved, how do they get into Europe?
Yeah, well,
regularly.
I would push back on that and really lean into the fact that the general population, the general public, has no idea how difficult it is to play professionally.
Yeah.
Right. And I do not look at playing in the USL Championship as stuck by any means. I'm not saying those are your words, but I'm just saying in general, I think it's important for people to understand that you're talking the 0.0001% of the world that play professionally. It is not easy. And it is not easy to play at the level that he's played at for as long as he played at this level. Yeah. Right. So by no means do I view that as stuck. Again, it's this instant kind of gratification, this Instagram highlight reel culture that we live in. That kind of looks at anything that isn't a European move as quote unquote failure or not living up to your expectation. I couldn't disagree more with that. That because again, being a professional, doing it year in and year out, day in and day out for an extraordinary amount of time is so difficult. So I would push back on saying anything
You
is.
get stuck there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Before the game is saying each national association is required categorize all of its affiliated clubs: Category 1, Category 2, Category 3, Category 4, and a minimum amount is assigned to each category. I think he's suggesting that for the association here in
Right.
Jamaica.
And I don't know off the top. I don't know what if they
No,
have.
there's no system that governs how.
Yeah, then
Yeah.
look. It's important to have
Which is
rules
what
for
I'm saying. It is a problem.
Yes,
There's
yes,
no system because the person who signs it to a contract ends up being your agent. So he controls you really.
correct.
Because he can say, listen, I'm not sending you here, I'm not sending you there, because he has your contract. And that's part of the issue, I think, with our local football. Why having more agent representation is important. But I also know that I know players who have attempted to act, attempted or told clubs to speak to this person who is my agent, and they immediately
Like blacklist them or like,
blacklisted the
yeah,
player.
it's short sighted.
And because they know that that person who is acting as an agent cannot get the player outside of Jamaica. So they're saying that, listen, if not my club, none of the other 11 clubs will talk to you, Mr. Agent.
Right.
And so you're going to be stuck in Jamaica in the lower tier.
Yeah.
So the player says to the agent, all right, forget about that. And he goes to the club. And that is why I think we need more international agents like you, who, if you see a 18-year-old in our high school league who is a top talent, probably play youth football for the country, you can say, listen, if I represent you, we not only can negotiate with a club in Jamaica, but we can negotiate with a club in the USL,
Correct.
in MLS. I mean, even if you go to college, we can still be a representative up right. And I think that is what we want, because that would, I think, challenge the local clubs to listen
Correct.
to agents and separate the roles.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think you got to look at the player's development. What do you want? What are you in the business for? If you're in the business to be greedy, then you're not gonna develop a reputation that players, top talent, is going to want to go to, right? Even you hit on the fact of, even if it's a college scholarship, you know how rare those are, and you know what you're doing, by standing in the way of allowing a player to achieve that, right? To further his education, to be able to be outside of his comfort zone, to really find out more about himself and what makes him who he is. The greed, it kind of centers, in my opinion, it centers around greed, and not really having the player's best interest in mind.
Yeah. I see Freedom Vlog is saying, telling you to take a look at Kyle Butler.
Tell Kyle Butler to hit the inbox.
All right. You're gonna I'm going to let Cody probably share his Instagram handle when we close down. So if any of you want to engage him, then you can. You will help a few players, but the system will still be broken. Which is what they're saying. The system is broken, but that
Right.
doesn't mean. And let me say it to people, because I like what you keep emphasizing. All right. At the end of the day, as a professional footballer, your first priority is to be able to take care of your family
Correct.
and yourself,
Correct.
right? And what I'm saying is that, Mark, it would be good to get into Europe immediately. But in the event that that is not an option, how prudent it is to remain in the league in Jamaica and still have the resources to play football full time and take care of your family.
Correct. And
I
it's
don't think it is viable. And so here it is that don't underestimate the value of the USL Championship and the USL One, because the earning power is probably 4, 5, or 6 times the amount you'd earn in Jamaica.
right. Right. I think it's important. And again, I will double down on my belief that most players that go over there, go over to Europe for the first time at a young age, the perception versus the reality of what it takes to make it as a professional, this is me speaking from experience, is vastly different than what you think in your mind. You're going to be, and this is not to be dramatic, this is the truth. You're going to be lonely. You're going to miss birthdays, holidays, special occasions with your family. You're going to question it. Is this really worth it? Right? My hope for players that are talented enough is that they have those people in their corner, in their circle of trust, that are able to help them along with this process. Because the footballing thing is one side of it. It's the rest of the time that really kind of defines you as a professional that is going to make it long term, or one, like I said, that is going to fall by the wayside.
Yeah. Yep. Someone is saying that the MLS transferred 33 players to Europe this past window, which is
Yes.
impressive.
It's massively impressive, and it's a trend that's heading in the right direction. I think European play. Look, I mean, look, the opportunities are out there. I even think, I know that there's a good amount of USL players that have bypassed MLS specifically, or altogether, and gone to Europe. So it's possible there as well. I mean, Jonathan Gonzalez. I think Jonathan Gonzalez from Louisville.
Well,
When,
Junior Fleming just left the
Here's
USL
a good
and
example. Yeah,
went to
Junior went
Toulouse.
to Toulouse, right?
Yeah, in France. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So for $400,000, I believe. Chris Richards. Yeah, Chris Richards went from what was he, FC Dallas, I believe.
Right. This person is responding to the FC Dallas thing, and then he says, somebody says Pepe.
Yeah, Ricardo Pepe, 20 mil.
Yeah.
You know, how it's incredible. It's incredible. So look, I think the opportunities are there. I look at Jonathan Gomez, who spent time with Louisville, right? And he bypassed MLS completely, and now he's going to play in La Liga in Spain. So it can be done.
Yeah. And I like what Triple, thanks for all the comments persons, and earlier Brain Drain had a super chat. Thank you for that as well. Brain Drain, for the super chat and your contribution to the channel. Appreciate that. Triple E says, I would rather Jamaican players take the chance and go to the USL for exposure outside of comfort zone. Yeah.
Exactly. Because that's what is not talked about, is the development, the emotional development that you go through being out of your comfort zone. And that is spot on, Triple E. I love that, because there is a learning curve that goes along with this. And that is never spoken about. It's just, all right, get me to point A to point B as fast as you can. The problem with that is you arrive early and unprepared.
Yeah. And I also think that the marketing of the leagues in the US, it's better. In other words, how I know that we have the TV coverage or the access to the league in Jamaica has improved. But the truth is, the league in the USA, the USL one, the viewership is way wider. So it's easier for players to create what you're talking, the highlight reels.
Yes.
Yes. In there, and better market themselves.
Correct.
As well. And I think a lot of that, I think this is where the agent comes in. A good agent can take a player to the USL and market him well enough in 2 seasons to get him into Europe.
Correct.
So it's not down to the USL, it's not down to the MLS, it's really down to the player and the agent.
Correct.
Representing the handlers of the player.
Right. But the personal responsibility, I think that's important as well, right? Yeah. Personal responsibility, what you're willing to take responsibility for, and really taking your career, taking hold of your career, not putting it in the hands of somebody else, right? But being undeniable and not just being undeniable once on a weekend, being undeniable 30 times throughout the course of a season, right? And if you can multiply, look, I'm working through it now. I have a player that had scored double-digit goals 2 seasons in a row with the USL Championship, and he's now made the move to Phoenix Rising, right? And he's not a domestic player, so the opportunities are there. The opportunities are there. They're there for you to capitalize on it, but you have to show ownership and take ownership of your career. You cannot leave it up to chance. You cannot leave it up to hope, because hope is not a strategy, right? And you cannot leave it up to somebody else to decide it for you.
Yeah, definitely. Listen, I mean, this was such a healthy,
Yes.
informative, wisdom-filled conversation. Really, really enjoyed it. I mean, a lot of stuff that we can walk away, with to kind of make this process work, make the process better, give greater exposure to our players financially, putting them in a different environment so that they can, um, you know,
They can flourish.
learn and flourish, and then move to greater grounds, higher grounds.
Right.
I think honestly that it's just like school. So I use this example that you can go to in Jamaica. We have traditional and non-traditional schools, and
Yes.
you can still leave the non-traditional school and still be highly educated, because the onus is really on you.
Right.
It's not just the system. So I believe players can go to the USL and work hard enough to move.
Correct.
I also want persons in the comment section that there are some players who they go to the USL or MLS, and that's where they want to be.
Right.
And nothing is wrong with that.
Yes, exactly.
And I think people think like, oh, if he stays in the USL, he's not. He's okay with that. We don't get to control.
Right, exactly.
We don't get to control their destiny. It's
Correct.
their destiny. And
Correct.
they must do what they may not want to go to Europe.
Right.
So this assumption that everyone wants to go to Europe. There are some people who wants to earn 7,000 US a month, be able to take care of their families, and they are living comfortable.
Correct.
And if they don't have to go to Europe to do that, that's up to them. But for those who want, the onus is on them.
Yes. Yes. Spot on.
Yeah.
You're spot on.
Yeah. All right, let me get these comments, and then I'm going to let you close out and share with the people how they can contact you. Lulu said, would Cody or any other agent be able to represent players directly, or do they have to go through the JPL or any other Jamaican entity? That's a good question.
It's a great question. It's one that I'm not educated on. So I would say for right now, I'm uncertain. Ultimately, like we talked about, if I can be the bridge, then I think it's beneficial for all parties.
So if a player call you right now and say, Cody, listen, I am, here's my highlight reel. You can talk to Javon or talk to your
Right.
LinkedIn Jamaica.
Right.
You find out about him. You're not sure if you can be their representative.
Yeah, exactly. Because my experience thus far, I've not dealt with players that are contracted for an extended amount of time with a specific club. The players that I work for are players that are either in search of new deals and are free agents, or ones that want existing deals to be improved based off of their play.
All right. Freedom says US and the MLS is a market Jamaican players should focus on. They are the only one giving us a real chance. That's the next thing there.
I would also say I would also argue that I think the CPL does as well.
The Canadian Premier League, they have started.
I believe so.
And you also, because you know what we have really dismissed is the fact that you also deal with female footballers. It's not just male.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So the women's game is growing massively, and again, I believe in their talent. I believe in their their abilities. Their how do I say this? They need more, I'd say, infrastructure. At least from the U.S. standpoint, the NWSL is quote unquote the league, and they do a great job. But big time European clubs are realizing there's a massive market, and it's an underserved market on the women's side that they're really starting to tap into. More money, more sponsorships, more TV, deals are coming through. So the future for the women's side, it cannot be understated enough, is massive.
Yeah, awesome. And before the game says the club owners need to be compensated for their efforts slash investment, but without a legal structure, starting with the GFF, there will be another Cody having the same conversation, and nothing is going to. This is what we're having a conversation about, that we can begin to put the legal framework in place, that
Right.
the club owners can separate their contract signing with the players from representing them as agents. That
Right.
has to be the first step.
Of
And
course.
there must be within the system a way that players can have agents and still negotiate with clubs. It cannot be that if a player says, talk to my agent, they are blacklisted. That
Right.
that cannot be. That's unprofessional, and
Correct.
it's not going to help the game.
Correct. Yeah, time is going to pass regardless. Do you want it to positively impact the game domestically and then national team wise, or are you okay with it being status quo? And if you're okay with being status quo, then I mean, like the comment said, I'm one man who comes with good intentions, but if the status quo is not going to be changed, I can only do so much.
Yeah. And remember, Claudia, I do understand this. The next Antonio, but Antonio didn't start at West Ham with that big contract. Ethan Pinnock did not start at Brentford with that big contract. They started in what, non-league football. I know Ethan Pinnock started there. So, but he was seeing the exposure. And
Correct.
and I say this, you think if Ethan Pinnock was playing out here, he would have been seen the same way. Sometimes the exposure is important. Sometimes you need to move away just for the exposure, and have an agent that is going to help you. But again, we assume that a player in the USL is working hard to get out of it. Maybe there are some players who they have found it to be viable. They're able to take care of their families, prepare for their retirement, and they're okay with that.
Correct.
They're okay with that.
Correct. And look, you've heard this quote. It's most critics aren't professionals, and most professionals aren't critics, right? So most of those opinions come from those who have no idea. I say that respectfully,
Yeah.
of what the undertaking of being a professional is actually like.
Most critics are not professionals,
And most professionals are not critics.
and most professionals. I have to write this one down. I'm going to use it one day.
I mean, it's true. The more I see, the loudest opinions are really the ones who if you talk about an achievement, their window of opportunity has come and gone.
Yeah.
I don't say that definitively. I say most.
Yeah. So Freedom Vlog FC. Yeah. We're closing out shortly. He's going to leave his info so you can talk to him about Kyle. We need to understand that everyone will ever make it to bigger leagues, but work with what you have. Give your 100%.
Correct.
Exactly.
Spot on.
Exactly.
Spot on.
But if the clubs aren't held accountable, they will continue to do what they do, which is being agents and contract. Right. I think
Right.
that's what before the game is saying. So let me just run through these. The USL is a very good league. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Lou, great shout with Pepe starting in. He played at North Texas, and now he's just made a move for 20 million
Yeah.
euro. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Claudia, listen, dreaming big don't mean starting big. There's a difference with dreaming big and starting big. All right,
Correct.
Claudia, there's a
Correct.
difference. The player playing in Brazil has big dreams, but he may go to the Ukraine to play for Shakhtar Donetsk before he goes
Right.
to
Yes.
Real Madrid.
Yes.
That's a pathway of many Brazilians.
Correct. It has nothing to do with internal aspirations or desires, if you will, professionally. Everybody is different, right? And what you base, what the general public bases what is quote unquote successful to, what you or I would base as successful can be different.
Yeah, and Leon Bailey is a good example. Leon Bailey didn't move to Bayern Leverkusen right away, or to there's a pathway, and the pathway is go to Belgium. And many people weren't tracking and following his career because it wasn't a big club.
Correct.
They were
Correct.
in Malta as well. But you take a pathway and it gives you the exposure. It was in Malta, you got the exposure, got to Belgium, exposure again. Bayern Leverkusen, exposure again. Premier League and exposure.
Correct. Correct. So what you're saying is long term
Long
thinking,
term. Yeah.
right? Not get me to A to B as fast as you possibly can, and let's skip the necessary steps in a player's development. You're spot on.
Yes. Listen, I want to thank you again for coming on. I'm going to allow you, to close out however you want. We're going to have more conversation because this was very insightful, wealth of knowledge and wisdom about how the process works. And every time I say, I'm going to close out, someone adds the next comment, right?
That's okay. Hey, go for it. I got a little bit of time.
Thank you, bro. He's saying that he played in Slovakia, not
right?
Malta.
Not
Yeah.
Malta. Well, perfect example. Who would you have thought that's the pathway to get to Leverkusen? No, but that's the reality, right?
Yeah.
Step by step by step by step, incremental progress.
You seen that one, Mr.
I'm
Cody?
reading this. Yes.
Yeah.
Leaving the inside. Yes. Hey, well, thank you for the platform, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk a little bit about myself, talk, what my goals and aspirations are for football, and genuinely wanting to help people. Like I mentioned earlier, and I say this with sincerity, hit me up on social media. My Twitter is C Laurendi, my last name, the number 23. And then on Instagram, it's just my name, Cody Laurendi. I'll do my best to get back with you. If it takes a few days, my apologies, but I am genuine in my desire to help people.
All right. So Twitter is
C Laurendi.
One word.
23.
23. That's
Correct.
all right. So that's, let's see, make sure, let me put it up and see if this is it. That's it.
CLAURENDI.
CLAU. Oh, take out the N.
LAUREN. Yes.
So CLAURENDI.
Perfect.
23.
Yep.
That's Twitter.
That's Twitter. And then Instagram is just my name, Cody Laurendi.
So that's C Laurendi 23 Twitter.
That's perfect.
And Instagram, it's
Instagram is just my name, Cody Laurendi. CODY Laurendi.
one word.
One word.
LAURENDI.
Correct.
One word. That's it.
One word. And then I have a professional page. My professional page is Cody Laurendi, all one word. FTSA.
FTSA.
And what FTSA is the agency that I'm a managing member of, called First Team Soccer Agency.
Okay.
Yes, perfect.
All right. So listen, you can reach out to him. I know that he's going to be back on the platform. We're going to talk some more.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, but I see Leroy saying I think there appears to be so let me just get this as you go. I think there appears to be an ignorance on part of Jamaicans and people involved in football and playing abroad. Why would you think a man would just come to Jamaica and pick up players willy-nilly? Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, that's a good question, but I also know from my life experience that there's talent everywhere. And if young people are willing to help themselves, I'm willing to help them.
Yeah, and then Bravo is saying, let's talk about Puerto Rico next.
Yes. Absolutely.
We'll definitely do that. Listen, Cody, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your afternoon with us. Welcome to virtual Jamaica.
Yes.
And I hope you will be in the geographical space of Jamaica one of these days.
That's right.
You understand me? Um, and is there anything you know Jamaican in terms of speaking outside of Yemen? Because everybody I ask, they tell me that they know Yemen. You were with Owen Garden. Did he teach you any Jamaican words?
Well, I mean, I don't know if this is more Trini centric or Jamaican centric, but everything nice.
Everything nice.
Everything nice. Everything Chris. Teach. I don't know if you respond you conversate with the elders as teach or consider them teach.
Teacher. Oh,
Teach.
that's a teacher.
Yes, exactly. But that's the extent. That's the extent.
I think your dog is saying that, hey man, it's time to get off this thing.
Throwing stuff at me.
Yeah, man. So thank you again so much. And we will be in touch. Really, really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise and your knowledge. I hope that, this will open the door
Yes.
for some sort of contact sharing of info. And maybe some players will make the transition. I
Yes.
hope, there's a way that you can be that bridge
Yes.
um,
Absolutely.
between Jamaica and the North American market.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
again, thank you for allowing me the platform.
you're
Genuinely.
welcome, man. Yeah, you're welcome. All right. So, yeah, man.
Yeah, man.
All
Everything
right.
nice.
All right, teacher.
All right. Respect.
Yeah, man, respect. All right, there you go, people. What an awesome conversation. Cody Laurendi, um, uh, American-born Puerto Rican, sharing his wealth of knowledge with us. Reach out to him. Maybe you're a player needing, representation, needing direction. Talk to him. Maybe you're a coach and you know of players. Maybe you're part of you own a club and you have heard him speak, and this is another way. In Jamaica we say there is more than one way to skin a cat. I don't know about skinning a cat, but I mean, here is an exception. It's not just one way to Europe. There are multiple ways, and he has just explained a pathway that has worked. It has worked for two players that we know very well, Ricardo Pepe, and closer to home, Junior Fleming. And if it worked before, it can work again. Right? So thank you so much, one and all, for joining, for being a part of the conversation. Listen, the content is so good, right? It's really free of cost. All we ask you to do is to like the content, share it with someone. Share it with a 19-year-old. Maybe he's playing in the Premier League, a 20-year-old, maybe a 17 or 18-year-old, and they don't have a pathway. Share the video with them so they can learn some of these things. All of that emotional thing he spoke about, the importance of understanding their emotional knowledge. Deal with that. Hit the like button, share the content. If you have not yet subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the platform. We have there's a Reggae Girls game coming on tomorrow. We have the coach of the Reggae Girls, Mr. Vin Blaine, will be on Top Shelf interviews and shows. Right. Thank you, Lulu, for the super chat. Right. So do that. Right. We're gonna be having him on talking about the squad, the players, as we prepare for the game on the 17th of February against Bermuda at the office. We're going to talk to him. We're going to do some build up to the game as well. You understand me? Dane Richards too. Yeah, yeah. Moved from USL and he got into Europe. So it is possible. It is a gateway. Thanks to our sponsors, Launch Legacy, Handle Risk, Seek Legacy. For all your personal insurance needs in Canada and the USA, visit them at launchlegacy.com or call or text 647 989 0782. And also Prestige Finance, lending a helping hand when you need it most. You need a loan of up to $100,000? Call them at 876-884-7390. And if you say to them, listen, We are calling from I Am Sure Sports. Here's what will happen. You'll pay no processing fee, same day processing. And guess what? Big news, people. Big news. 0 to 4% interest rate. Have a great day until we speak again. It was my pleasure being with you. Love and respect to all. This is Black History Month, and we have some legendary entertainers coming through. Yes, sports and entertainment as we celebrate Black History Month. Look out for that. Every week, starting next week, we're going to have some entertainer coming in to share with us. Look out for that. Sports and entertainment, and I Am Sure Sports. Bless up. Have a great day, one and all.